Hi, everybody. This is David Turnquist. I'm a licensed real estate broker in Texas. And today I'm going to talk to you about leasing a home. This is going to be tips and advice for landlords and tenants and property managers as well. So first, you need to make sure in Texas that the home meets all of the Texas property code requirements. I'm going to tell you, in my experience, I've been licensed since 1999, so over 25 years now. And at least half of the properties that I see that are for lease do not meet the code. In other words, they don't have all of the requirements under Texas law to for all safety and security. So this is very important. Usually, it's ones that are for lease by just regular people, landlords, not agents. But you'd be surprised how many agents are involved with a lease and have not check to make sure that the property does meet the code. So what is the Texas property code? I'm going to have a link to it here on another slide. But first, just make sure that the home that you're leasing, whether you're the landlord or the tenant, make sure it meets all of these requirements. Number one, all doors that lead to the exterior, usually the front door and the back door. And if there is a door going from the house to the garage, because it's an attached garage, that door would also be considered an exterior door. So those doors not only have to have a lock on them, whether it's the doorknob lock or a doorknob and a deadbolt, but they also have to have a third lock or another lock, and it's usually a keyless or one-sided deadbolt. That means that there's a tab on the inside that the tenant can turn and engage the deadbolt, but there's nothing on the outside that where you could put a key in or anything. So if the keyless deadbolt is engaged from the inside, you cannot get in the house because there's no way to unlock it. So that is to protect the tenant from anybody getting into the house, even if with a key, if they're unannounced, and that is the law. So you'll see all apartments have them already, but rarely do single family homes or condos have them because most people don't want that in their house. But on rental properties, it's a requirement. So if you're going to rent your single family home, you're probably going to need to add these on each of the doors. Now, there are some exceptions or alternates that you can put instead of the keyless deadbolts. By the way, they're not easy to find. Home Depot will, may have a couple of them, and you may have to order them, off of Amazon or something. But and they're not easy to put in either. So I would recommend that you call a locksmith. We use Texas Rekey, Mr. Rekey, to handle all that, or you can have a handyman that knows what they're doing. But if you're going to do it yourself, it's harder than it looks. So make sure you have those. But if you don't want to do that, there are some exceptions. One of them is called a ring bolt, or yeah, it's a ring bolt. It looks like a kind of a Pac-Man head. It's a metal plate that's kind of shaped in a C, and then there's a plate that screws into the inside of the door jamb, and then you put that plate into the door jamb plate, and then the C thing prevents the door from opening. It's not going to open, I can assure you. The screws that go into the door jamb are very long and thick, and that plate is going to stop the door from opening. So there's no way anybody's going to get in without ripping the whole door jamb off. And that thing the C plate, the ring bolt hangs on the door with a chain. It looks terrible and it's bulky, and I don't like them, but it's legal to put it on there. Just make sure you don't put it too high so a child can't take it off and disengage it from the inside. It's a fire hazard. Um, Also, you could put an arm bar, which is basically a bar that hooks into some hooks so that it prevents the door from opening. So that it's basically a bar that barricades the door. Again, it looks ugly. I wouldn't recommend you do that. Just get the keyless deadbolts or one-sided deadbolt and be done with it. Also, you'll see the the door viewer there, or sometimes they're called a peephole. Every exterior door has to have one of those so that the tenant can see who's on the other side of the door. unless the door has see-through glass in it. If it's opaque glass that you cannot see through, then it doesn't count. So the tenant has to be able to see through to the other side of the door. And unless there's a window immediately to the right or left of the door, and when I say immediately, I mean literally attached to the door jamb, like a side window to the door. A window in the next room doesn't count. All right, so make sure you have those. There's diagrams of them. You can see the ring bolt down there in the arm bar. All right, next, you have to have smoke detectors in every bedroom. And you have to have a smoke detector in the hallway outside of the bedrooms. Also, there has to be a smoke detector on every level of the house or every floor, even if there's no bedrooms there. You do not have to have one in the kitchen, surprisingly, which is where most fires are going to start. But make sure you have working smoke detectors. Also, number 4, all windows must have working latches. So if you have an older house and the windows, the latches are broken or missing, you're going to have to replace them. So make sure that they're working. It really should have the window to make sure it's working as well. Number 5, if there's a sliding glass door, the door must have a working lock or latch on it. All sliding glass doors have an automatic latch on them. Sometimes they break though, so if it's broken, you need to have it fixed or replaced. And there needs to be a second lock on it. Usually that is called a pin bolt. And you can see the picture of the pin bolt down here at the bottom of the screen. That can't be more than 48 inches off the ground. Again, so a child can remove it in case of a fire. Also, you could have an arm bar, sometimes called a Charlie bar, that prevents the door from opening. That bar kind of folds down and stops the door from moving, and then you can fold it back up. You cannot put a wooden dowel stick or a piece of wood at the bottom of the door to do that. If it's your own house and you're living in it, that's fine, but you cannot use that in rental properties. Okay. Number 6, all keyed locks have to be rekeyed within 7 days of a new tenant moving in. Now you can rekey it before they move in, but you have to rekey the locks every time that the property changes tenants, and that's to prevent someone coming in from a previous tenant handing out keys to people and they can get into the house. So it does have to be rekeyed. We use a locksmith for that. Texas Rekey does that. Here's a link to the property code. So if you want to read through it, it's very lengthy. And then here's a link to a YouTube video that Mr. Rekey produced. And it goes through all of these things that you have to have and shows you what they look like. So I strongly recommend that if you're a landlord or a tenant with a rental property, go ahead and watch this YouTube video here at this link. All right, next, you need to set up criteria for the tenant screening. You can't just randomly pick people because you like them. That could get you into trouble. Now, if you're renting your own property, there's a lot more leeway in the law about who you can deny access to your home. But if you're listing your home with a real estate agent for lease, the agent has to follow all federal, state, and local laws, and that includes following fair housing law and the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there can be no discrimination of any kind: race, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, and handicap. So those are all out, and so you need to set up legitimate criteria that you can see. And it's helpful on the listing if you put what the criteria is. That way they can't say, well, you didn't take us because we're a different religion than you or whatever. So have the criteria in writing and stick to it. It's very common to list something like a 620 minimum credit score. You could put 600, you could put 650, you could put 700 if you want. As long as you have a set of criteria that you're going to follow and you follow it equally with everyone, then there's not going to be any issues. But if you don't post anything and then you deny somebody and then you accept somebody else that wasn't as good, that could get you into trouble. So by posting it, it makes it a little bit easier. So again, some common things that are acceptable for screening: a credit score of 620, no evictions on the record, no foreclosures or bankruptcies in recent years, income of at least 2.5 times. And I see a lot of times they want 3 times the income. That's kind of overkill there, because if the house is running for 2,000 a month, that means the tenant's got to be bringing in at least $6,000 a month in order to meet the $6,000 income. A lot of people that are renting, there's a reason they're renting, because they're having trouble getting a loan, or they're going to be here temporarily. So making their income requirements too high is going to really filter out, a lot of the tenants. Also, employment, income, and history. You want to make sure that they have a way to pay the rent. Do they have a job? I want to see your last 3 paychecks. What if they're self-employed? Well, I can get a copy of your bank statement. If there's a couple things you want to, cover up, you don't want me to see, that's okay. Also, if they're retired, they still probably have income from retirement income or Social Security. I just need to verify your incomes to show that you're able to pay the rent every month. And if you can't prove that you have any income, well, why would I want to lease to you? Okay. Also, I would strongly recommend that you do not accept credit reports from the tenant directly. And I'm going to get to this in another slide, but uh, there have been, plenty of documented cases where tenants that are, kind of good at this game playing, they have falsified the credit reports. They get credit reports from somebody else, and they use a program like Adobe Write to go ahead and edit the PDF file and make it look like it's theirs. You can erase somebody's name and put your name, and it's impossible to tell that it was changed or altered. So if you need to run your own credit and background checks, and we use a company called mysmartmove.com. Excuse me, which is, I think it's part of TransUnion or Equifax, one of those. And they do the background and credit check. Now, background, again, don't automatically deny somebody because they have something on their criminal background. There's a difference between somebody that got a DUI 20 years ago and someone that robbed a store with a gun 3 years ago. So make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, and take into account the severity of the record and how long ago it occurred. We rented a property to a tenant that did have a felony on their record, but it was like 7 or 8 years ago, and they had gotten out and spent the last 2 or 3 years working, and never missed a day of work, had income, they were married, had a kid now. So we took a chance based on their current, what they've been doing lately. And these turned out to be great tenants. They never caused any problem. They ended up a couple years later buying a house and ending the lease. So don't eliminate or refuse to show to anybody that has a mark on their record, because that also could be considered discriminatory. Also, pets and animals. If it's your house, you can decline to allow any pets. Just no pets, a no pets policy. Or you can limit the types of pets. You can say, we'll allow dogs, but they have to be under 40 pounds, or whatever you want it to be. So usually if you're going to have pets, we require them to have a picture, a photo, or maybe two of the pet, so we can see what it looks like. And you can also restrict certain breeds. It's very common for people not to accept pit bulls, and other breeds, maybe Dobermans or Rottweilers or whatever. But pit bulls, it's very hard to get insurance to cover the property. And I'm not going to argue with people about, oh, well, pit bulls can be really great, but the problem is there's a liability issue. So most places are not going to accept those. Now, What if the animal is a service animal? And when I say service animal, I mean a legitimate service animal that provides a service for someone that's disabled, like a seeing eye dog or someone that's deaf, or has seizures or whatever. These dogs are highly trained, usually for a year or more, and those are they're not even considered pet. They're not considered pets or animals. They're basically a medical need, and so you cannot discriminate against someone who has a service animal. And again, I want to stress a legitimate service animal. There's a lot of people who are pretending to have service animals and they are not. I've never seen a service Chihuahua, but I have seen plenty of service German Shepherds and Labrador Retrievers and Golden Retrievers and stuff like that. Now, how do you know which dog is legit and which isn't? Well, we use a screening service, a third-party company called PetScreening.com. You can see uh, their name down here at the bottom of the screen, and they do this every day for a living, and so they go out and they verify the dog and verify the person's need for it, and, through medical needs and whatever, because there's certain things you're not allowed to ask, whatever. So as a landlord or a property manager, I don't really want to get involved in that and then get in trouble if I ask the wrong question. So we use the screening service for it, and it doesn't cost us anything. And by the way, if it really is a service animal, it doesn't cost the tenant anything to use the service. But if the screening service finds out that it's not a legitimate service animal, there is a fee involved. So I can tell you this many times. We've had people who claim to have a service animal, and then we found out through pet screening that it was not. They were just trying to get by, because you cannot charge a pet deposit for a service animal. So that becomes an issue. By the way, dogs are not the only animals that can be service animals. Miniature horses can also be service animals. Now, I've never seen anybody that had a miniature horse as a service animal, but they are the only two animals that are allowed to be service animals. Okay, moving on. Number 4, identification and verification. You're going to need to have an ID, whether you have a driver's license, a military ID, a passport, or a state issued ID. In Texas, if you don't have a driver's license, you can get a Texas state issued ID. So we need to make sure that you are who you say you are, because there is a lot of fraud out there. And also, if you have a job, we want to make sure that you actually have a way to pay. So we want the last 2 or 3 months of pay stubs, and things like that. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about scams and things that happen. So tenants, if you're a tenant, something you should be aware of, or be aware of, um, and that would be landlords who are pretending to be landlords and they don't actually own that property. They're putting ads on things like Craigslist and Facebook and other areas where you're finding them online, or they're putting bandit signs out on the road. Call here, 1,200 a month, whatever, and you call and everything sounds legit, and they meet you over at the property, and they tell you they need a deposit. They're going to accept you, but they need a deposit up front, and then you pay them and they tell you, okay, the keys are in the lockbox, here's the code, and you go over there and there's no key over there, because it was never their property to begin with. So make sure that who you're dealing with if you're a tenant is actually the landlord or the property manager, and they have a way to get in the house. So I would want somebody to open the door for me, and before I hand them money, I want to see the key, and I want to make sure that key works in the door, and I want a written lease in my hand, and not just some handshake that we'll do it later. So if you're a landlord, some scams you need to be aware of that tenants will pull is handing you fake credit reports and background checks. Never accept one from the tenant. Always run your own. Now they'll argue with you because they're not free. They usually cost like $40. But that's not my fault. Because other people have burned me, I can't allow you to give me yours. Now, maybe yours is legit, but I can't allow it. So if you want this place, I'm going to have to run a background check on you. Also, make sure that what they put into the application matches what's on the report. If they tell you they don't have any felonies on their record, and then the background check shows that they do have felonies, that's an automatic no, because you lied. It's not the fact that you had a felony 10 years ago, it's the fact that you lied on your application and said that you didn't have any. That tells me I can't trust you as a tenant. Also, if they put down a place of employment and you've never heard of it, call the number and find out. And also look them up on Google and see if it's a real place, and find out where this place is located and check it out. Because I've had people that just made up a fake business and put their friend's phone number, and their friend covered for them. But it sounded fishy to me, so I looked it up and it wasn't a real place. So again, these people tried to scam us, but we caught them. I've caught on because I know what to look for. All right. Also, make sure you have a valid lease in place, a valid written lease. In Texas, the Texas Association of Realtors has the TXR 2001, which is the standard residential lease. Now, if you're not a real estate agent, you're not going to have access to this because it's a copyrighted form and they don't make it available to the public. But if you're using an agent, the agent will have the lease and they'll be able to fill it all out for you for you and the tenant. But there are other places you don't have to use that lease. You can have an attorney draft one for you and probably get a little pricey. You can find some examples on the internet, but keep in mind, just because you download a lease off the internet doesn't mean that it's valid or legal to use in Texas. The lease that you downloaded for free might be one that was drafted in Oregon and is geared towards Oregon law and not Texas law. So you need to be very careful when you download stuff off the internet to make sure that it meets the code of the state that you are in. And in Texas, the standard lease is the TXR 2001. Also, the reason you have a written lease is to protect both the landlord and the tenant. Now you have a written agreement about what we've agreed to. What are the terms? When does this begin? When does it end? How much is the rent? When do you need to pay it? What can you do? What can you not do? Etc. So having it in writing makes it very easy to enforce because there's no real gray area. It's right there in black and white. This is what we agreed to. Well, I want to do this. Well, it's not in the lease, so you can't do that. Well, I thought it meant this. No, that's not what it says. So if a lease in Texas, the law says if a lease is more than 12 months, it's required to be in writing. So a short-term lease, like a 6-month lease, can be oral, but I would strongly recommend that you do not do that. Only because anytime you have an oral lease, there's no way to prove in court if you end up going to court because somebody broke the oral agreement. How are you going to prove to a judge what you agreed to? Well, all the other person's going to say is, well, I never said that. You need it in writing to make sure that it's enforceable. All right. You also need a before and after inventory and condition documentation. So you need to make sure that you have photos and a checklist of what the property looked like and the condition it was in the day you moved in. And that same form will be used the day you move out. So that in Texas, we call that the inventory and condition form. And your realtor will give that to you. If you're doing it on your own, you may be able to find one online. But as the landlord, I strongly recommend that you take photos of everything before the tenant moves in and document everything with a checklist. When the tenant moves in, they're going to be given the inventory and condition form. Normally, we give them 7 days to complete it because it's very lengthy. It's like 7 or 8 pages, and so it's going to take them a while to do this. If you're the tenant, I strongly recommend that you take your time to fill this form out correctly because everything that you put on that form is you saying, this is what's right with this property and this is what's wrong. And if you don't put all the things that are wrong with the property when you moved in, the landlord could then charge you for those things that are wrong with the property when you move out. And you can say, oh, but it was like that when I moved in. Well, not according to the form, because you didn't bother to fill it out correctly. So take your time as the tenant and take photos, and make sure you filled it out correctly. You can always ask your agent if you have one, hey, did I fill this out correctly? What do I need to do? They cannot fill it out for you, but they can help you to make sure that you're doing it right. Also, repairs and maintenance. The lease has things in it where it says who's responsible for repairs and who's responsible for certain maintenance things. Repairs are typically the responsibility of the landlord. So the landlord is going to either do the repairs themselves if they're minor things, or they're going to hire a handyman or an electrician or a plumber, whatever the situation is. If there's a hole in the roof, then they'll hire a roofing company to come fix it. The tenant should not be making any repairs on their own without written approval from the landlord. I can tell you as a property manager myself, I never allow the tenants to do any repairs unless it's something really simple, like using a plunger in the toilet or something. But I don't want them doing anything electrical, or changing out pipes, or even changing a ceiling fan. I don't even want them painting, because sometimes I had a tenant that painted without asking, and they got halfway through and they didn't like it and just left it that way. So when they moved out, we had to have painters come in and repaint everything. So the landlord is responsible for the repairs. The tenant is responsible for notifying the landlord that a repair is needed. So all repair requests from the tenant need to be in writing to the landlord or the property manager. And they need to say, hey, this is what's wrong. It's best if you send a picture with it. Most of my tenants will text me a photo of the problem and then what's wrong. So texting is in writing. It doesn't have to be an email, or definitely not a letter. So emails and text messages are considered to be in writing, and I prefer text messages because they're quicker. If it's an emergency, I would want you to call me, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. In other words, if water is pouring into the house because the pipe burst, I need to know that. I'm going to tell you to go turn off the water. And if you're unable to do that, I'll have to go over there, send somebody over there to turn the water off to the house. And then we'll get somebody out there. If the air conditioner goes out, I need to know so we can call the air conditioning repair company. Now, tenants sometimes get impatient and they're like, well, it's 98 degrees today. I need the air conditioner fixed immediately. Now, you need to stop what you're doing and get over here. Well, I'm not a repair technician for air conditioners. I will call the AC company and I will get an appointment and get them out there as soon as possible. If it's Tuesday and they tell me they can't get out there till Friday, well, it's going to be Friday. It's the same thing they would tell me if it were my own house. So I may have to go get a fan, or I may have to go get a little window unit myself to take care of my stuff. You need to remember that the landlord or the property manager can only do what they can do when they're at the mercy of the repair people. Plumbers are often backed up for days, and so they can only get there when they have an opening. So you have to be patient as a tenant sometimes, and the landlord has to make the repairs in a reasonable amount of time. So, if it happens on a Friday night, it's a good chance you may not see a repairman until Monday or Tuesday. All right. So also in the Texas lease, there are certain things that the tenant is legally responsible for. One of those things is changing out the air conditioning filters. You have the little grate, the intake duct where the AC comes, is pulling air into the attic. And then, of course, the vents are blowing the cold air back in. Well, there's a filter there. That filter needs to be changed like every 2 to 3 months. You should not be just ignoring it and saying, well, it's not my problem. I'll just leave it there, for 2 years. If you do that, it could clog up the system and literally choke out the air conditioner. If the air conditioning tech comes out there and pulls the filter and they show us that the filter had never been changed and it's the clogged filter is why the air conditioner died, well, that's the tenant's fault. You caused the air conditioner to die, and I'm going to bill you for the repair cost. So make sure that you are paying attention to that and changing out the air conditioner filters, because the lease requires you to do that as the tenant. The lease also requires you to treat for insects. If you have roaches or whatever, then you need to call a pest control company, and it's not the landlord's responsibility. It's your responsibility. You're the one living there. There weren't roaches when you moved in, and now there are. Maybe you need to clean up better and spray every once in a while. So you can go buy some, roach motels or some pest spray, or call a company to come out and take care of it. But that's your responsibility. You're not living in the Holiday Inn. You can't call and get everything taken care of for you. So there are certain things when you rent a house that you, as the tenant, are responsible for. You're also responsible for the yard in most cases. You got to mow it, you got to edge it, you got to keep weeds out of the yard. If the house is in an HOA neighborhood and you don't take care of the yard, and the HOA sends a letter to the owner and they're fining them, that fine's going to be assessed to you as the tenant. They're going to add it to your rent. And if you don't, if you keep doing it, that's a breach of the lease for failure to maintain, and they'll evict you. So make sure that you are keeping up with your duties as a tenant. Also, changing light bulbs. That's the responsibility of the tenant, not the landlord. All right, during the lease, the landlord has certain responsibilities. Number one, collect the rent. Usually it's due on the first. Most landlords will either take checks or electronic payment, or Zelle or whatever. That's going to be written in the lease as to what type of payment is acceptable. The company that I manage, we take online payments through a portal. We use a company called Doorloop, and the tenant logs into their tenant portal and they pay online. The landlord also needs to make timely repairs when requested and necessary. Not all repairs are necessary. If there's some minor cosmetic issue, the tenant doesn't have to do that. You can't keep having them run over there every week because you don't like the way something looks or is working. Also, certain things don't have to be repaired because they're not necessary for the home to be habitable or livable, like the dishwasher or the disposal. The landlord doesn't have to repair those things. Normally they will, because they don't want to leave them, they don't want dirty water sitting in the dishwasher for 6 months, but they don't have to repair those things. They do have to repair things like the air conditioner and heater, the plumbing, and the roof, things like that. But minor issues that are more luxury items, no, they don't have to repair those. The landlord also will visit the home periodically to do what's called a walkthrough, just to check in, see the condition of the home, make sure that you're not tearing it up while you're living there, or make sure that you haven't snuck other people in there that aren't supposed to be there, or you haven't snuck in a dog that's not supposed to be there on the lease. So they are allowed to do that. Now, the landlord should be notifying the tenant in advance when they're coming. They should not ever just show up unannounced, and they should never go in the property without notifying the tenant that they were going in. That's a good way to get yourself, shot in Texas. So make sure if you're a landlord that you're notifying the tenant in advance and schedule a time. Usually the tenant's going to want to be there. I've had tenants go, yeah, go whenever you want. I'm not going to be there. They trust me, so I go in, I do my quick walkthrough, write down a couple notes, and leave. And that's the end of it, because I have a key. All right. The landlord should also notify the tenant at least 30 days prior to the lease expiring. Keep in mind in Texas that the lease doesn't actually expire on the date that it says it ends in the lease, because there's an automatic renewal on month-to-month basis until either the landlord or the tenant gives notice that they want it to end. So you have to give notice. and either the landlord or the tenant can give notice that they want the lease to end, but it's usually 30 days. Number 5, remind the tenant that of their responsibilities in the lease. So again, those maintenance responsibilities are certain things that the tenant is supposed to be doing. And if they're not doing them, then that's a breach of the lease, and the landlord can evict you if necessary. Also, if the tenant wants to extend or renew the lease, then the landlord can prepare an extension or an amendment. That also needs to be in writing and added to the lease. So the landlord and the tenant would need to sign the lease extension. You can extend it, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever. You could extend it 2 weeks if you want to. All right, what are the tenant's responsibilities? The tenant is responsible for paying the rent on time every month without excuses. 99% of my tenants always pay. We don't have an issue, but usually when they don't pay, there's always an excuse. Every once in a while, it's a legitimate excuse, but an excuse nonetheless. So if you communicate with us in advance, we can work with you. But if you just don't pay the rent, that's going to be a problem. And if we don't get it, there's going to be a late fee, and then there's fines every single day that you don't pay. And after about 2 weeks, we're just gonna file for eviction and get you out of there. So there needs to be a lot of communication between the landlord and the tenant about what's going on, especially if there's some reason that you can't pay the rent or all of it, at one time when it's due. Rent is usually due on the first day of the month. Notify the landlord in writing about any problems or repairs that are needed. You need to make sure the landlord is aware that something is broken. We had a tenant one time that there were termites in the house, and they just never said anything. They literally covered it up with a poster. And I'm like, why would you do that? Why don't you just tell us so we could come fix it? Instead, they let it, fester, and the termites spread, and it cost thousands of dollars in damage. This tenant was just unbelievable. Number 3, follow the terms of the lease and don't do things that are not permitted in the lease that you signed. So, if you're not allowed to have a pet, don't bring a pet into the house. That's probably the most violated thing I see. Also, if your name is not on the lease, you don't belong in the house unless you're a short-term guest, for a few days. You don't get to bring your girlfriend or your brother or whatever into the house just because, oh, well, they want to move in with me. Yeah, I didn't approve them. So anybody that's going to live in the house, I have to approve and know about. You can't just move somebody in because you want them there. Number 4, allow the landlord to come by and view the home periodically. They are allowed to view their home as long as they're not doing it like every week. Even once a month is way too much. Usually we do 2 times a year, like every 6 months. So you can't stop them from coming in. But if they just show up unannounced, yes, you can turn them away. But I wouldn't do that, very often. Just say, hey, I can't let you in right now, blah, blah, blah. But if you'll come back any day next week after 4, just let me know. Number 5, take care of the property like it's your own. You're living there. Take care of the property and don't trash it. When you move out, make sure that it's the same condition as when you moved in. Don't tear up somebody else's stuff. All right, ending the lease. The landlord is responsible for giving the tenant at least 30 days notice before the lease expires. Also, when the tenant moves out, use the inventory and condition form when they moved in, and then compare it to the move out and compare, making sure what's different. See if there's any new damage that was caused by the tenant. And if there is, make a note of it, take a photo of it, and document it on the form. That way you can deduct the expenses that it's going to cost to make the repairs for that damage. Get price quotes on the repairs, if any are necessary. A lot of times we have tenants leave after a year or 2, and the home is in pretty good condition. They haven't done anything above normal wear and tear that I need to deduct for. They've emptied the house, they cleaned it, and it's almost in the same condition when they moved in. When that happens, they're going to get all their money back. But when they leave it trashed and there's still stuff in there, literally trash in the house, and they haven't cleaned it in months, that's a problem. We're gonna have to have professional cleaners come in and, and steam clean the carpets and all that. That's a lot of extra expense. Number four, return the security deposit or what is remaining of it after the itemized repairs. The landlord has 30 days to get the money back to the tenant. So the tenant's going to need to give them their forwarding address, but they have 30 days to do it. They are not entitled to it, the day they move out. So even if they ask, you don't have to give it to them because you have to have time to assess the property and make sure there's not anything wrong with it that you didn't notice yet. All right. And tenant responsibilities. If you're going to move out at the end of the lease, remember you must still give 30 days notice. You can't just move out when the lease says it ends. You have to give notice, and it needs to be in writing. And also, you need to verify that the landlord got your notice. Sometimes they'll pretend, well, I never got that, so I'm going to bill you for another month. When you send notice, make sure and verify that they received your notice that you are ending the lease. Number two, pay your last month's rent on time, and do not, under any circumstance, tell them that they can keep your security deposit as the last month's rent. That is not legal. The security deposit is to cover any damage that you did to the property while you were there. So you can't use that as the last month's rent, because what if there's damage to the property? The last month's rent has already been used up, and now there's no security deposit to cover the damages. In that case, the landlord or the property manager is going to file a lawsuit against you in small claims court, most likely in Texas. It's justice of the peace. And they're going to take you to court and put, it's going to put damage on your, damaging marks on your credit. And they're going to come after you. So don't do that. Number three, be sure to clean the home thoroughly and remove all belongings and trash when you move out. It should be just like when you moved in, or better, if you want your money back. Number four, take pictures and document the condition when you leave. And number five, give the landlord your forwarding address so that they can mail you your deposit refund within 30 days. Again, the landlord has 30 days to get you that money. If they don't have it to you within 30 days, then you can do something. Then you can file a complaint. All right, well, thank you for watching the video today. I hope this was helpful. The contact information for my company is here if you'd like to. And I appreciate you watching. Have a good day.